Hello, this is Kade, and this is going to be day 2 of the Intergalactic Aerospace Expos, and of course it is Aegis Dynamics, which means that everything crashed of course, and the game itself is also quite crash-tastic today. I already crashed 3 times, so from now on, if I'm gonna crash again, I will probably be recording it in multiple sessions and just stitching it together, so that could be the case for this particular video. There's just not much I can do about it, because it really crashes frequently right now. Front and center we have the massive ship that is the Aegis Dynamics Reclaimer, the massive salvage ship, which is of course going to be used to non-mob entire shipwrecks. It's a behemoth of a ship. It's probably going to have a really useful role, and it's going to be possibly quite a profitable bit of industrial business that you can conduct. Right now, however, there is literally nothing for the ship to do. So I'm not sure if it gets you any other loaners. I don't believe it does, because it is in-game. But you can check the ship loaner matrix just in case. If it has a loaner, maybe it's interesting to buy it now. Otherwise, because it is flight ready, it technically should not increase in price anymore. So even if you're interested in salvage, I would hold off from it for later, until that gameplay loop is finally in the game, which will probably be still quite some time. Flanked here by the Sabres. The Sabre Comet over there, there's only reason you would buy that if you want that paint job. Otherwise, just buy the normal Sabre and you can upgrade the components in game to whatever is best at the time, like the meta components, because those keep changing around patch to patch as they try to balance things. We go down and we go and visit the holo displays. There's nothing here because there's just some seating areas today for Aegis, and like with Consolidated, we had a couple small displays there. And we come up to the Nautilus. The Nautilus is one of those ships that I also recommend against personally, and that's because I don't see how they make the mines effective enough. Because we're operating in a 3-dimensional environment, and we're not operating in a 2-dimensional environment. So mines in 3 dimensions is really, really hard to lock down an area with, because you're going to need a gargantuan number of them for it to work. Otherwise people will just fly around it. So I don't really know how they're planning to make this thing work. Like maybe if you have like a mining operation, you just deploy those turreted mines as extra defenses while you're mining away. That could be an option. But beyond that, I don't really see the absolute use of the ship. Some people said like, oh, it's got this nice big turret up front, so maybe you can use it like that with a couple of smaller flanking turrets. However, those of you that have not been keeping an eye on the leaks, we're going to get the RSI Perseus, which is pretty much going to be a gunboat with 2 really big turrets on it, which will do that role just better. Over here we have what I believe was the Falcon. Yep, it's the Falcon. It's the refuel and repair ship using a couple of drones. If you're planning to play Space AAA, then this is going to be the ship for you. And even if you're not, and you're just having an organization, having a couple of these ships could be really handy to allow yourself to refuel ships and repair ships in space, so you don't need to go back to stations and things like that. So this would be ideal to support like fighter operations, things like that. If you have larger ships, of course, you're going to need the MISC vessel for refueling. And then we have the, sorry some people hate me for it, the absolute hideous thing that is the Redeemer here. And the fact that it's like in holo display, taking it out, it's just clear that they just don't know what the fuck to do with this thing. Because in the end, it doesn't really fit. It doesn't really fit Aegis, it doesn't really fit a lot of things. And honestly, I think the main issue with this ship is going to be the engine design, which is just like, yeah, it has that rule of cool feeling to it, but it doesn't really fit, it doesn't really look great. But we'll have to see what they're going to do with this ship. Personally, so yeah, from the outside, I would not buy that. There are better drop gun ships available that are also flyable. Now, unlike yesterday, they're actually using all the hulls today, because Aegis is Aegis and they have a lot of ships available. Which of course the Consolidated and others did not really do. We take the small entrance here to Hall 5, and we'll just start there. Let's go through here, and I believe this was the bombers, if I was not mistaken. And it is. So Aegis Dynamics of course offers two torpedo bombers right now. We have the stealth focused Aegis Eclipse, which is an absolutely gorgeous ship, and it really does the job well. This thing properly set up with the right equipment, depending on the enemy's radar size, like you can approach them to like 2 kilometers or sometimes even less, and they will not detect you. That's how stealthy the ship can be. Now, granted, currently we don't really have cross-section stuff in there, so you can make pretty much any ship really stealthy. But this thing will have also a modifier to it, which will help it to be additionally stealthy than some of these other ships are. The stock loadout is not as stealthy as it can be, so I would definitely recommend changing that. That said, the downside of this ship is the price tag. At $300, it's really expensive. And for this ship to be effective, you're gonna need multiples of them. Unlike the Retaliator, the Eclipse can only launch 1 torpedo at a time. This may not seem like a big issue, but when you consider when you're launching a torpedo, you need to acquire a lock and then launch the other one. That time in between allows the target ship to recharge some of its shields, which can actually mean that they can survive your torpedo hits, and you carry only 3. So if you want to take on like a hammerhead with eclipses, you're probably going to need like 3 or 4 of them to do the job properly. So that does bring in a lot of extra cost. Of course, because it's so stealthy, it's very unlikely that anybody will ever know that you were there, which can be really beneficial. And for a while, and it was patch 3.9 I think, when countermeasures were not working properly, this thing was the de facto go-to bounty hunter ship, because you would just lock anything from 15 kilometers away, smash a torpedo into them and collect the bounty. Then we have the big boy, the Retaliator. Now I have an entire video on the Retaliator, so I will try to keep this one short. It's a gorgeous ship, and it's an absolutely horrible interior design. I still think that this thing needs a complete overhaul and redesign of the interior space in order for it to be a, sensible, usable ship, which I just don't think it currently is. This is of course my opinion. It is still an effective ship. It has a lot of torpedoes, but I think the main downside is that it needs too many people, because there's too many of these tiny manned turrets. Now, had these been larger turrets, bigger guns in it, then it could be a really interesting like small factor gunboat, but currently as it stands, I just cannot recommend this ship. Let's move on. I do love the design of these hulls, but they do feel a little bit oversized. I'm curious if, I hope that morphologists will do an architect reviews on the Expo hull. That would be a really cool addition. Let's move over here through this immensely bright thing here. I think that the brightness settings has gone a bit haywire. Just like a couple of other things. And over here we have the collection of Vanguards. The Vanguards are a fairly simple recommendation to buy. They are really capable fighters these days. They pack a really amazing punch. They're fun to fly with, 2 people, 1 in the turret, and 1 as pilot and operator the main weapon systems. The downside is of course those 4 size 2 fixed weapons, which are bespoke. So you only have like 4 options. So this will limit, your chance, your availability of what you want to run with weapon-wise. That said, the 4 options do cover the entire field, so you should be fine. Turret on top does the job as well. It's more like a choice, like which variation do you want. On the right now we have the Sentinel, which has the EMP and the awesome interior, which I think looks the best because there's like these holographic panels with computery stuff on there. The Warden is just the baseline of the Vanguard. It has more of like interior space, more designed for just a long range patrol. You have the Hoplite, which is designed to be like a small dropship. And we have the Harbinger, which brings the torpedo loadout. I believe from the top of my head these were size 7 torpedoes. So each of these Vanguard variants has value to it and could easily be recommended for use. There's not one of them that I would say is bad. So just pick the one that you like the most and have some fun blowing people up with them. In PvP and also in PvE, these are really capable ships. So let's move to the next hull. And you can see just how tight of a fit this reclaimer is in this hull. I don't think it's entirely, like, it looks partially like it's clipping in there to me, but could also just be just on the edge, but not entirely sure. But it's just a massive ship. And if you like your massive ships, then it will definitely do the job. And it has that correct industrial appeal to it, which does really matter. Like, a ship should look like what it is. That way you just know what you're dealing with and what you're flying. Let's go to hull 2. Watch our heart rate, because our guy is getting a little bit exhausted from me sprinting around all over the place, but then this place is so freaking massive. And here we have the good old Avengers, the Penguins. Pardon me, sorry for that. The Penguins, still really capable. But now, of course, they have competition in the form of the Nomad. So it's more of a choice what you want to run with. That said, the Penguins come in a few variations. So you have a couple more options in there. Like you have one with EMP, you have some with holding cells, things like that. They remain a really, really solid all-around, you know, tier 2 starter ship. Like, this is the step up from the Ahura, Mustang, and 100 series. If you're gonna go above that, you're looking at Avenger, Nomad, and 300 series. It's like there's just really not much bad to say about any of these ships. It's the only thing that I always say about it is just I don't like the design. But that's a very personal thing. So if you like the design of it, they are really good recommendations to fly around with. So if you're having like I said, you got a tier 1 starter ship and you're looking for a small leg up, they are a really solid option to this day. And the nice thing is, you know, they're all time available, of course, except for some of the special variants, so do keep that in mind, but you should be fine. And then finally we come to the last hull, which is the Hammerhead and the Gladiuses. Well, the Gladius is still, in my opinion, the best light fighter. It has this really flexible, good package weapon loadout. It can actually take a hit, unlike the Arrow, because the Arrow just made of paper. Which just makes the Gladius a really, really good ship to fly around with. It's one of the older ones in there. It recently got the cockpit rework. So if you're looking for a good light fighter, Gladius, definite recommendation. Again, don't buy the special variant, buy the normal one and change the equipment as you wish. And we come to finally the Hammerhead. It's a really easy recommendation. I've always liked the Hammerhead. Like when it came out, I called it like, this is the Corvette. And I had a couple of videos with comparing to the Polaris, which of course I consider a motor torpedo boat. I don't consider the Polaris a Corvette because it isn't. And this is really a Corvette. Like, this thing is just designed as a flanking screen ship like this will just melt fighters all over the place. You're talking about 6 turrets, each with full size 4 weapons on them. Like it comes standard with these pent repeaters, which are currently really the best weapons to put on these turrets anyway. The only thing right now in game that can effectively take on a hammerhead is a retaliator. Or you're going to need multiple ships with other torpedoes as well. It has a potential for a massive shield pool, a lot of firepower, and because of the turret layout, it has pretty much no dead zones at all. So no matter where you're trying to approach your ship from, you're going to be hit with some turrets. Fire, and as these are, each turret is full size 4 weapons, that's a massive amount of firepower that's going to come your way. And it's just a larger ship, so the turret gameplay from the hammerhead is actually really good, because the ship itself doesn't move that crazy fast, so you can quite easily stay on target. And depending on what's trying to fight it, like the pilot doesn't really even need to move the ship around all that much. Like I fly this thing as a pilot with some frequency, and I have like between 1 and 6 people gunning for it. Like just yesterday we're flying around with España 2942, and we had every turret manned in this thing, and we're just fighting NPCs because there was nobody else on the server. It melts anything that comes in your way. But other times I've been flying and people try to attack it with... I've seen Vanguards trying to go for me, Constellations, Valkyrie for some reason. It doesn't matter, this thing will just melt anything. And it has so much shields, it will just tank pretty much all firepower that was being thrown at it. So you need either a larger number of people trying to engage this, or you need torpedoes. Which means that right now, if you're flying with a small organization and you guys like to play around with each other and do combat stuff, you can't go wrong with a hammerhead. You just can't. So yeah, that's my take on the current selection of Aegis that is being shown here at the expo. I'll also quickly address the capitals, which is of course the Idris and the Javelin. In my opinion, as things stand right now, neither the Idris nor the Javelin can get a recommendation. The reason for that is that the Idris has really been overshadowed. Like it gets a bit of more like power crap as time goes on. Especially the P model. Like if you have an Idris M, you're fine. But the Idris P just doesn't have enough. And then they try to change that with the aftermarket kit. So you can now buy an aftermarket kit, which is like, oh yeah, please give us another $300. I am not okay with that. I do not think that's the right way to go. I think they should have just made the P itself more capable. Especially considering the price tag. The Javelin, like at the original price, which was like two and a half thousand, could be something set for it. Right now it's getting like, the price is just way too high. It does come now with full equipment, which they did change from previously when it would not. So that will help. However, my other previous things what I stated around the Javelin is the fact that it's not a ship that can operate independently. It's going to need supporting units, which just means the overall cost of operating a Javelin is going to be really, really high. So it's going to be only useful for the larger organizations, and even those would only be able to field effectively one or maybe a couple of them because of the requirement of all the extra support around it. So capital wise, I would really not recommend either of them, but if you want them, you can join the F5 wars. They tend to sell out within like a minute to 5 minutes, so you gotta be on top of it if you really want them. But yeah, that's it for Aegis Dynamics, day 2 here. It is still one of my favorite manufacturers. I am actually sadly not having that many ships of them anymore because, well, I changed my focus on what I want to do in the game. So I don't need as much combat stuff anymore. And Aegis, of course, is a very major focus on combat ships, with only the exception being right now is, of course, the Reclaimer. And we have the upcoming Vulcan, which is going to be repair and refuel, which is, well, if you need repair and refuel a lot, it's also in a way combat focused, more combat support. So I hope, like previous, this was going to be a useful overview for you, and you have a bit of a better thought for what's going to be around with Aegis and what can be worth buying and what can be best avoided right now. And I hope I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you for watching.